Welcome to this season of the Broadway Podcast, where here we give you a more real-time point of view of people who work, interact, and entertain here in Broadway, Nashville. We get the opportunity to provide hot gossip, but we also take the opportunity to provide a more positive outlook on people who call Nashville their home. Ride with us as we take you down a trip on Broadway.
This is the life we choose, life we choose. And honestly, I wouldn't want it any other way. I've been doing just fine, alright now. This is the life we choose. This is the life we choose.
Hey Logan, how you doing?
Good.
Thanks for coming on the podcast with me, man.
100%.
So today I want to talk to you a little bit about like what you have going on and your personal life as far as work. I know you bartended for a while in Broadway, but I kind of want to get into detail a little later on where you are now as far as like coming off of Broadway from bartending to doing some more corporate things. You know, I think it's important for people to know a healthy way of seeing people coming out of the bartending life. But I do want to get started with how you came about, you know, being in Nashville, like where you're from.
Okay. So I was born in Georgia, moved around a bunch, moved to PA, back to Georgia. My mom took us to Nicaragua for a couple years. So that was a cool, like, perspective change. And then came back when I was 18, back to PA, started with Red Lobster, and then worked there from like 18 to almost 30, probably 2005, I think. And then went to Gordon Biersch, which was a brewery concept. So because I want to be more alcohol involved, because I just like that part of the business so much more. So moved to DC. I was in DC for a couple years, and then just decided I want to go live a dream and bartend at the beach. So moved to Ocean City, bartending down there for a summer. Moved to Florida, did the same thing. Then kind of missed the leadership part of it, that side of the business. So went back into that part, went to Chattanooga, visited Nashville for a birthday, and just fell in love with the city. I mean, years ago, it was still as fun as it is today, and it was like, I need to be here. So after a couple of years of trying to get here for the right opportunity, I just said, you know, screw it, and moved up here and lived with some friends for like a couple months. I got the job at Aldine's, but it was very long traveled, but I love it here. It's hard pressed to move anywhere else.
Yeah, man, I agree with that. I did like some of the things when I moved from Alabama. I was like, man, working downtown seems like the thing to do. 8 years ago, it was a little different how they operate now as far as getting hired downtown. It's a little easier now with all the new companies coming in and all the new bars opening up. It's a little easier than it was then versus now. But you say you worked at Red Lobster. I used to work at Olive Garden for like 7 years. So the Darden family. Yeah.
There you go.
How was that? How'd you like it?
I really enjoyed it. I think it's got a great base, right? So they just teach you so much about how to do everything the right way or their way. And it kind of helped me a lot in my career where it came about being super organized when there's always a system. If the system works and your system's there and you have a system, it's super easy to manipulate other things to get things going because you have a good base. Your foundation's good, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was really nice to have that experience for years and really be ingrained in leadership for so many years. You know, I started as a dishwasher.
Yeah.
You know, and then worked my way up to manager and GM and almost director level. So to have that good base of understanding what, you know, not only the systems to how a restaurant and a bar should run, but then also how to treat people, you know, in leadership and development, that stuff is, you know, instrumental in kind of where I'm at right now.
Absolutely. Do you think that you still implement those kind of like policies working downtown as far as like, you know, how it's a lot busier, you know, on Broadway than it is, of course, at Red Lobster. But do you think you have the opportunity to like actually use those skills still that you learned at Darden?
In a way,
Yeah.
I think so. I think a little bit. It's just different, right? So when you're used to managing 150 employees and having to be in charge of the health inspections and total quality and waste, and your boss calling you about labor and all these other things, you think about like a lot of things, right? Then you go work at Broadway and it's like focused, vodka soda, vodka Red Bull, 20 Bud Lights. So I kind of take that to when I worked in the kitchen for a lobster, because they have a screen, it just comes in. So if they seat the entire restaurant, you're getting all the orders. Right. So like, we have all the orders coming in. Boom. They're all right here in front of you. You can't do anything except take care of those orders. So I think that's a little bit helpful, just the pace, right? So as a line cook, you have no choice but to do it faster.
Right.
Because it's not stopping. The tickets are still coming through, regardless if you're slow, tired, understaffed, doesn't matter.
Got you. Do you think that, because for me, like I also started off like in the kitchen, like front of the house, like I went to management eventually for a little bit. Do you think people like that who have those kind of experiences are successful downtown, or are they kind of like in the middle? Because I feel like if you have that experience and you can like see all concepts of like how the operations are in the restaurant, that can kind of sometimes be a hindrance, you know what I mean? Because you start getting into your head as far as like, oh, I manage this place. So like you start kind of like calculating in your head how things should run. Do you think that's like a burden sometimes?
Yeah, I think so. If you really get in your head about how things should run, and how you want them to run, I think that'll stop your progress. Because, the best part of not running your own business is you don't run the business.
Right.
You're not accountable for the money. You're not accountable for people's lives, livelihood. All those problems are not your problems. You walk in and you collect a paycheck. You take care of guests. You treat them the best you possibly can. Hopefully you make an experience for them, right? Because I think that's fulfilling. And then you leave. You're not responsible for anything else. If you start making yourself responsible for something you have no control in, that's going to be frustrating.
Exactly.
Right? Because like some of my best friends, we should run like this. We should have this. Yeah, but you don't have the investment there. But there's a reason they don't do that way, and it might be wrong. Yeah. It might be, but it's not your call.
Right.
So the best thing I always say to somebody is, "Not my monkey, not my circus. What is my job?
Right. Exactly.
What do I need to do to be the best person for my role?" And everything else is just static.
Exactly. Control your controllables. I think that sometimes we get caught up in like trying to operate within the operation, you know what I mean? And not just like be there for like what we're there for. And like I feel like when I was managing over at my old job and I came over to the company I'm with now, I kind of was like, oh man, I wish this, and this. But once you start and once you get to a point where you accept like your role at a place, your livelihood is better. Like 100%. How you go to work and your attitude is a lot better. Broadway sometimes brings out some beasts, like when they have like all these issues and they think they're like the easy fixes are easy fixes. But when you think about it, like in retrospect, these are major companies and like there's no easy fixes, and there's always a higher up. There's always a training you have to go through. And I think a lot of bartenders and servers or whoever that works in the industry kind of get caught up and become victim of the industry because they get so caught up in like what should happen versus like just go to work and make your money and go home, And that's like almost like a bad concept to have, but like I think it's a more healthy concept to have.
So I think it's a balance, right? So the other side of it is that none of it's being malicious, right? So it's like this is how it should run,
right?
Because I want to do a better job. Like I was coming from a place of, hey, I want to do a great job, and this would make my life easier. And I could give a better experience. I could have a healthier experience, personally and professionally, if these things were this way. Now, sometimes they are correct, right? Those opinions are valid. Sometimes it's just about perspective, right? So like what you care about and what the owner might care about might be completely different things, right? So like pricing, you could feel you're ripping off a guest and they could feel that they're not making enough money, because you don't know what the perspective difference is. And I talk about it all the time because perspective, I think, really matters when you're trying to work in a busy environment that you have no control in outside of your little bubble. Right. Because, you have no idea where that guest is coming from, if they just had if they just got thrown out of a bar, if they took something, if, their coworkers, are brand new and they literally have no idea what they're doing. You know, if they're asking what Fireball is, you know what I mean? Like, we've all worked with that person, right? So it's like, what am I, you know, like my back hurts. So I think perspective is super key on how we interact our day to day, like how we interact with our coworkers, how we interact with our guests, and how we act with our bosses, because I think we lose the perspective and then all of a sudden we're upset, right? And then we go home, this job sucks, my life sucks because, you know, I'm not making enough money. Yeah. And then to begin this rabbit hole, like, oh, well, these things could be better, and my life would be way better if we did all these things. But yeah, but you can't control any of that.
Right.
You know?
And it's tough on Broadway too, man, because like you got to be really selective with the places that you choose to work at, because people just think, oh, it's Broadway, the money is like great across the board. But honestly, a lot of these places have been here for a very long time, and people don't realize coming in, like as tourists, like they don't realize that this bar and that bar are two totally different places. And when you start working, like say for instance, like you came from out of town and you saw like the vibrant actions of like how, you know, Broadway is like operating, and it attracts you, especially if somebody who has like a lot of experience bartending or whatever. It attracts you to want to move here and work here, and then you get here, you're like, oh damn, man, like this bar is not what I thought it was, because like prospectively speaking, like you come to visit, it's totally different from working there. So I think that people need to do their research before they come here and start working. But like I think, like you said, operationally, like you just have to kind of like have a balance between how the place runs versus what you want to get out of it, I guess you can say.
Yeah, 100%.
Because then it becomes toxic if you don't. And we've all been in situations where our job was toxic because we made it toxic.
Yeah.
You know?
And they're also very different places, as you said. Like, I mean, where do we hang out, right? Like Tin Roof, Barstool, why do we hang out there? We have friends there.
Right.
So that bartending is slightly different than bartending at Aldean's or, you know, Luke Bryan's or Casa Rosa, because we're typically not going to those places, right? We're not going to the big bars where, you know, a bunch of 21-year-olds on spring break are going.
Yeah.
We're going where we typically know someone, typically can get taken care of quickly. You know, it's not about the free drinks. It's about the fact I can go, hey, man, and I can get to the bar.
Yeah, for
you know, so if you don't have skill set, if you don't know people, if you don't want to know people, if you just want to turn and burn and go, okay, cool, my blinders are on, then you're not going to be successful in a place like Tin Roof, because you have to know people. Because on those slow Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and out of season, you know, the only reason you're getting people to come in is because you know people, you know, because you're not getting tourists.
Yeah. Going back to operations, like how is your experience from leaving a place like Darden, like this more corporate style, versus like your experiences, how it's operated in like downtown? Like, because it's a polar opposite.
So I think, and I love my experience in Darden, because I think it gives you a good base. But I think, you know, some people, even in that system, get burnout because they get so systematic, right? There's no wiggle room for any growth. So then they stop getting growth and they do the same thing, right? So when I went to Gordon Beer, she was very wide open, smaller company, very like big picture, try new things, try to be innovative. And that was perfect for me, for my skill set. Just like how to, you know, just try to grow my business the way I wanted to grow it. My boss kind of gave me autonomy to do that, which was nice. But I think when you come down here, you need to be flexible, right? So like,
what do you mean? Be flexible.
So if you're working in if you're working for, you know, some of the bars that are owned by certain people, they have very strict rules, right? No matter what, is what it is. So you have to be, okay, those are those rules. You might disagree with all of them. Well, if you want to work there, you need to follow them anyway. You might, you know, if you work at some of the smaller bars, they might not have any rules. So then you need to make the rules, because otherwise you're not going to be successful. So depending on your standards of what you want to do and want to, you know, how to bartend, I think it really kind of depends. Are you flexible? Like if you want to work at a cocktail bar, but you don't want to work till 2 a.m., okay, then that lowers your things, right? If you can have your boundaries about how you want to work and where you want to work, but the flexibility, and you might have to move some of those boundaries, depending on what kind of money you want to make. If you want to make $200 a night and craft bartend, great, man. There's places like that. If you want to make $500 more craft bartending, you might not be able to hit any other. Like you might have to work a certain spot. You might have to put up with longer hours. You might have to work doubles. Like there's things that you might have to be flexible about, because you're not going to pick and choose all the things you want in a perfect world without being frustrated.
Exactly. What are your experiences though, as far as operations? Like, have you had like a good experience or a bad experience when it comes to like Broadway operations?
Oh, I love Broadway.
Yeah.
But I also, for me, it's never been like, I joke all the time. I go, I just turn my brain off. It's vodka sodas, right? It's like, I'm not managing everybody here. I'm not looking at labor. I'm not looking at sales. I'm not looking at forecasts. I'm not looking at, what our last, no one's calling me right now or you're showing me pictures of a light switch, right? Like no one's doing any of those things. Yeah. So for me, I get to hang out with my friends. I get to take care of guests. I get to meet new people every day. Mm-hmm. Like that's fun. Like I've met groups of people that I've hung out with in Boston. Like they come saw me. We all had drinks up there. So I think that's the best part of it, right? And if you can do that and not be frustrated and realize the true joy of our job is we get to make an experience for somebody. Mm-hmm. Now, some experiences are not as great as others, as we all know, right? Like some people you don't want to interact with for more than 15 seconds.
Obviously, I'm looking. Not looking. No,
but there's some people that are really cool. They just want a good vacation and, want to talk to you, mm-hmm. right? And when we had that time, I think it's really cool to kind of engage with some people. I mean, I met a couple of guys from Jersey who were kind of being dicks, and I was a dick back to them because I could tell they're from Jersey. Yeah. Because I grew up around that area, and we started talking hockey, and they're like, "Yeah, we have hockey tickets. Come see us anytime." Got their numbers. I'm like, we don't have that opportunity in a lot of other professions.
That's very, very true. That's one of the reasons why the appeal for me is Broadway is because you get the opportunity to almost kind of be yourself a little bit and like actually have a personality and actually be able to like interact with different types of people, all walks of life. Like for me, it's like you those people that are going to be Karens and you like kind of like say, fuck, like what, you treat them a certain way and you can try to get them out your hair. And then you have the people that you can kind of like be rude to respectfully, but it's not really rude. It's like banter almost.
Yeah, it's joking.
It's like the New Jersey guys. Like you can kind of like have a personality on Broadway. So my experience with operations, I feel like it's almost like out of sight, out of mind. Like when you see a person of power in your restaurant or your building, like you're like, it's a problem because like if they're never really around because they don't have to be because you're allowed different, ways of how to work. As far as like I was at Olive Garden, it was very stuffy. Yeah. It's always ever changing because it's corporate, so it's what works for the general public versus like not what works for the employees. Yeah. Which I feel like is a little bit of a balance. Bartender downtown because you have the leeway of being able to like manage yourself because to be honest, like a lot of people that come downtown and work have a lot of experience, so you're not having to manage them a lot, but also it's like you get to get your personality out there too. So like I love it. I had
I always, that's the reason I still work on the weekends. I mean, still like I have the opportunity.
You work on the weekends, don't you? We love that.
Most people that have no problem.
Yeah, no, I'll just give you hell for that. But let's go into like what you're doing now. As far as I know, you still work downtown like very short periods of time throughout the month, but you're transitioning over to a different role. What does that entail? So
I do the bar standards for an airport concessions company. Mm-hmm. So what that kind of means, my role is a little fluid in the aspect of like I help develop training material. So like making a bar manual, going through recipe cards. Developing all that stuff. How to use a jigger. To us, call me? How to use a jigger obviously is super easy, right? Yeah. We know it, but having to tell that to someone who's never worked at a bar or a restaurant before, was challenging. To be like, what is step one, right? Like, okay, like just pour the liquor, right? Like that's easy. But you're gonna go, oh no, how do you hold it? Like, do you hold it with this finger? Do you hold it like you hold it like that? Like, and trying to train someone without that instruction is hilarious because all of a sudden you'll get some people that go, cool, got it. And some people are go like, and be shaking, because they don't know where to grab the bottle, so trying to bring that standardized. But then the other part of my role is we do menu developments. We look at optimization. So I'll go behind a bar and see, okay, how does the back bar look? Is that helpful for the psychology of sales? Is the well set up correctly? Are there multiple wells? Are any of them set up? Are the bottles all capped? Is the wine being dated? Yeah. Is it set up so I can take less steps in general? Is there a solve here? I'm on design calls. So as we build bars out, we move, I was on one yesterday where we didn't need a well there. So we put an extra refrigerator so we could have more champagne. being chilled in the actual bar. So again, less steps, right? So if I'm only going to put one bartender there, I don't need 2 wells because the other well's not going to be useful, right? So let's put something that is useful there, so we can put more product or more backups, so that we can take care of more guests without the bartender having to run back to the back, go to the cooler, get more champagne. Like that's
so you have that power to be able to decipher what's easier and what's not easier for. So you get to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's interesting because you know how leaving places where you don't have that power and then entering a situation where you do have that power. Are you using your powers for good? Are you going to be corporate? Like, because I don't want you to turn us and be like.
Here's the thing. It's a balance, right? So I've always felt one way is if you look through the filter of, does it make sense for the employee to take care of the guest, right? So sometimes the guest needs outweighs the performance, right? But most times, and I've kind of lived by this philosophy that the guest experience will never exceed the crew experience. If the crew experience is awful, that guest experience is probably going to be awful.
It's going to be terrible, yeah.
Because they're not happy.
Like, why do I care about you if they
don't
care about
so
me?
Yeah, here's your $20 Jack and Coke, whatever, buy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, my experience isn't great off that. You know, I'm already paying a higher price, right? And there's a lot of things that go into pricing, but like, it's a lot of, if you can make your employees a little bit happier, a little more confident, more trained, you give them the tools they need to operate. Like, most people want to do a good job. So as long as we do our job in supporting that, then they're probably going to give a good guest experience without us micromanaging them 8 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
So then it's just tweaking the little things to get a better guest experience, right? Maybe it's the right people on the right shifts. It's, changing the drink menu, changing the food menu, just making these a little bit operationally, the sound, being on or the right channel.
Yeah.
Things like that kind of all matter. But like the big part of it is, are our people taken care of? Are the people, do they have the best? So if the bar is set up correctly every day, no matter what, you are less stressed walking into your door, right? Because things have a home.
Right.
So your brain goes, okay, cool, I can work in this. If it's a mess, as we've all walked into a bad clothes, right? And you have stuff randomly, you have 14 open bottles of Maker's Mark. You're like, what happened last night?
Now, for people who don't understand a lot of the lingo, because like, hopefully this podcast will reach out to like people that don't work in the industry, because we want to educate everybody. Like when you say like having homes and like your wells, like I kind of elaborate on that because a lot of people don't really understand, because like we are talking to people who are guests too, and like as far as like you saying like to make the job easier for that bartender, like as a patron, and if I never worked in the industry before, we get those a lot. Like a lot of people come in just to be tourists. They don't really know that. Okay, the speed well is the speed well. What I'm serving you quickly is what I'm serving you quickly. And this is an educational, moment too. Like you can be like, well, okay, my speed rack is set up for like my generic liquors, right? And then, like you said, like you want the people to be able to not have to travel so much to be able to be successful for the guests. I think that when people come into Broadway, especially because it's such a high volume, they don't realize that they're waiting a long time. Sometimes not because it's so busy, it's because of the steps that the bartender or the server has to take that aren't necessarily at their advantage. And getting back to your point, going to the airport side of it, or going back to like your genre right now, setting it up for success for those people are important. And I think that people start gradually understanding that importance as they become patrons, because just like tipping 5 years ago was like way worse than it is now, because it was an educational moment for people to be able to see like, okay, that's how they make their money. They don't get paid. Certain states get paid certain ways, certain wages. Yeah. So I think it's a good opportunity to really kind of like elaborate on what do you mean as far as like making it easier for the bartender to make it easier for the guests.
So, I mean, if anyone's ever watched Bar Rescue, right, that kind of was the big thing to how, what does it mean to be behind a bar? Right. I always joke that, every bartender is behind a bar, but not everyone behind a bar is a bartender.
Me, just kidding.
Just kidding. But so it's how many steps do I have to take to make a cocktail? Right. So if I have to walk down the street or down the road to get a freaking bottle of Tito's, and then come back here to get the simple syrup, and then go here to get this blueberry reduction, like I'm wasting time I could be taking orders.
Exactly.
Right? And some bartenders are great. We work with them. They can go, hey, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Grab 4 cards, take care of everybody. Like, that's amazing, right?
That's almost like saying, sorry for cutting you off, that's almost like saying people are good test takers and people aren't good test takers. So when it comes down, we'll get back to that point too. Though when it comes down to the bartender making their job easier, because like say for instance you do have like all those purees and you have all those ingredients and those steps. Some bartenders who are good test takers they know how to dumb it down a little bit more. Like I think us, like we're like if I have to go to get a black bear puree, I'm going to already set my bar up with all that stuff.
It's going to be right here, 1, 2, 3.
But some bartenders that are new can still be good with a system, like you said earlier, would still be just as successful if that company or that entity would be like, all right, let's make it more, more usefully.
So yes and no. So I agree with the point that because I fight this urge in my head all the time at Aldine's.
My first argument.
No, because I think in a volume place, whatever works best for you is important, right?
Yeah.
Because if I have my bottles, and then my bottles are typically very different from a lot of the bartenders where I want my stuff because my arm goes here, and that's the action I want. Mm-hmm. So I take that and put that when I go to a well. Right, but I don't want to go and make your well like that. So what I do for my company when I go to consult like each bartender and bar, what I do is I go to the manager, I say, here's my recommendation. Everything needs to have a home. So your well, which is typically 3x4 or 4x3, so like your bottles, right? I say what I would do is typically set up your cocktail well because you're going to sell that. Now your main speed well needs to have obviously your vodka, gin, rum, tequila, triple sec. And then your big guys, so your Tito's, your Jameson, your Captain Morgan, your Jack Daniels, the things that 80% of the single mixer people come in to get, right? So then the well, what I tell them to do with the other tree, the liquor tree, is get your bartenders together, figure out a way, and make it all consistent.
Right.
Because it will change. There's 5 things that will kind of change in terms of like what's important to them.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting at Nashville, I don't know what's good for Cedar Rapids.
Right, exactly.
Because I don't work there.
Yeah.
Right? So like when I go to Aldine's, hey, it's important for me to make my decision but to standardize it everywhere is not always good. So for even at Aldine's, the microcosm that is each bartender, right? Like what works for you may not work for me. Right, I'm like, what the heck? Why is this? You walk behind somebody and go, who worked here?
You have that experience too now because like you left the bar scene. You're going over to operations again and you get to see how it was, what it could have been, and you can implement those things into what you're doing now. Quickly, I think, do you think that it's necessary to go through that process and like owning a business or opening up a bar or even going into operations? I think it's important personally for people of power who have decision-making ability to be able to have worked in that industry before. Some people say no, some people say yes. How do you feel about that?
My main thing is, are you passionate or enthusiastic about something? And it depends. If you want to be the end-all, be-all decision maker, then I think you should have to truly been in every position. Yeah. What I've found more successful is if you believe in your people and you're willing to listen and understand them, you're way more successful because your job's a heck of a lot easier. Yeah. I mean, if I say, hey, what's the best way to build a bar? Now I could give I could give my perspective, right? We also have 5 people that have done consulting work that bartend, right? So collectively, we all could be like, oh, I would move this here, with this here. I'm on design calls that have 25 people on them. Mm-hmm. There's a reason for that because I may see something and someone may go, that's a great idea, or not, that's not a great idea. We only have this room. We can't do that. It's not in the budget. But when you collectively use people to say, hey, what's the best decision? I think that's kind of the end all be all because you might be an amazing leader, but a terrible bartender, right? That's fine. You don't need to be a bartender. Ask a bartender you respect their opinion on how to make their job easier, right? That's part of being a great leader. So I don't necessarily think you need to run everything, but you need to have respect for the people that do it so you can listen to make it more successful. Because at the end of the day, they're doing the work, right? Yeah. So like if you're owning the business or a director of operations, if you don't consider any of your employees' their opinions valid, I mean, it's like
what are they there for?
Yeah, it's like a relationship. Yeah. I mean, if you say your partner, "Hey, I don't validate any of your concerns," what happens, right? It typically doesn't go well. It's the same thing in a business.
Yeah, it becomes a revolving door.
It's a relationship. Yeah. You know what I mean? When you see leaders you know, and there's a bar that just opened up that took like 15 people from the industry. Why? Right? Culture. So
Right, exactly.
if you have a mindset of a person that says, hey, I want to be with this person because he's going to, you know, I know what to expect from them. You know, that's always going to win.
I totally agree. And I really am glad that you have had the opportunity to be able to switch over, you know, to your new role. I think that you're going to do great things. And I also think that you can implement a lot of good, like operational viewpoints because you have entered and exited places, you know, you see how it is, you see how it goes. Just, I hope as a friend, you keep that mindset and don't get all caught up in like the mix because you know how it can get sometimes numbers mean more than people. I think you're a fair person. I think you're going to do really good in what you're doing right now. And I really appreciate you for sharing all that with us because I think it's important for a lot of people that don't know how to exit or how to go about leaving like the bartending lifestyle, the serving lifestyle into something bigger and better. I think it's good for us to see that. So I really appreciate you for that. And I really wish good things for you and just keep me posted on what you got going on. We'll always support it. But we're going to wrap it up today, man. I really appreciate it.
100%.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you.
This is the life we choose, life we choose. And honestly, I wouldn't want it any other way. I've been doing just fine.